Down to the big meeting between British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Prime Minister Modi. It's expected to happen in the next hour in Mumbai. They will be meeting at the Raj Bhavan, and of course they will be exchanging the progress of the India-British partnership so far. This is the second time the two leaders are meeting in the last 3 months. The Prime Minister was in London in July when the historic FTA, the Free Trade Agreement, as it's now called, the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement between India and Britain was signed. They will take stock of the progress after the signing of the FTA that has happened in these last 3 months. A majority of British goods will now become cheaper being exported into India, and vice versa. Indian goods going into the British market will become substantially cheaper, whether it is Scotch whisky, cars, electric cars particularly. All of that will now see cheaper rates, both for Indian exports into the UK and also vice versa. The British Prime Minister is in India for a 2-day visit. Today is the business end of his visit. He will be meeting with Prime Minister Modi. The formal bilateral delegation level talks and restricted talks will happen first thing in the morning. That's going to happen in Mumbai. And then subsequently, the Prime Ministers of both countries will address the Global FinTech Summit, which is happening at the Geo Center at the BKC complex in central Mumbai. This will be the second time, like I said, in the last 3 months that both leaders have met. In fact, the last time they signed the historic free trade agreement between India and Britain. It is the first major free trade agreement that India has signed with one of the Western countries, and also for Britain, one of the first major free trade agreements that country has signed after Brexit, which happened in 2017. Both leaders will also co-chair a high-powered CEOs roundtable that's going to feature top executives, both from India and the UK. In fact, the British Prime Minister has come with a 125-member business delegation. That is the largest business delegation that any British Prime Minister has come to India with. This is the first time that Keir Starmer is visiting India after his election last year when the Labour Party, the party that he leads, won a historic landslide victory. The summit will also review the progress under what was outlined when they met back in July as the Indo-UK Vision Roadmap 2035. That's what they want to do to double the existing trade in both goods and services between India and the UK, whether it is trade, tech, climate, education. India stands right at the heart of this global partnership, driving innovation and growth. So just to give you a sense of perspective of the gamut, the broad range of areas that are covered under the India-UK bold vision that's been unveiled for 2035. It's a comprehensive plan aimed at deepening the strategic, economic and technological partnership. It envisions, and let's bring that up, the graphics, it envisions a significant increase in bilateral trade. In fact, an ambitious target of £25 billion per year has been set as far as trade is concerned for every year between now and 2035. Currently, the goods trade is a little under that, and the services trade, if you were to add both of it together, it comes to about £50+ billion. Now, both countries are committed to driving growth as well as job creation through greater market access for each other's goods. On the defense and security front, there will be collaboration which will expand into advanced technologies, complex weapon systems, reinforcing shared priorities when it comes to innovation and resilience. There's also a strong skills partnership which is in focus, with plans to establish campuses of leading universities in both countries. Already, a couple of British universities have begun operations in partnership with Indian universities right here on Indian soil. And this is, of course, in an attempt to try and foster global talent exchange. Both sides are also set to advance cooperation in cutting-edge technologies, including future telecom, artificial intelligence, and critical minerals, which has become a huge leverage point in the geo-economics and geo-trading economies that we're seeing in recent times, particularly under President Trump. Also, there is a significant climate partnership between India and the UK, where both countries will work together to accelerate clean energy transitions and mobilize climate financing, steering the world towards a more sustainable future. I want to go across to my colleague Akanksha Swaroop, who's joining us here in the newsroom. Siddhant Mishra is joining us from Mumbai, where the two leaders will be meeting over the course of the next hour or so. 10 o'clock is when the official proceedings will begin between the two prime ministers. Akanksha, what is at stake as these two leaders meet?
Right. I think it is the timing which is very critical for both the countries because remember, it is a historic deal, not just for India, Zaka, but you're also looking at Britain touting it as one of the biggest deals, or rather the biggest deal they've struck after Brexit. For India also, it has to mean something when the British Prime Minister is arriving with the biggest trade delegation comprising 125 executives who are going to be part of this delegation. You have the British Airways, you have the Rolls-Royce CEO, you also have companies like Diageo, you also have companies like say BP, which is the oil company. You're looking at telecom as well. So a host of sectors now are going to be involved in today's talks at that CEO roundtable that will be taking place. And we can expect a host of announcements. What we are learning from our sources is that there's going to be one key critical announcement. We are all waiting what it is going to be. But there's been a turbocharge of a momentum when you look at what's been happening between both the countries after the FTA. It's not just trade, it's not just fintech. I also want to emphasize on the way our security cooperation and defense partnership is also on the rise, because Prime Minister Keir Starmer has arrived on a day when India has also concluded its maritime exercise Konkan, that commenced on 5th of October. It took place in the western part of the Indian Ocean. This is the first time that our carrier strike groups were part of this exercise together.
All right, Akanksha, we'll leave it at that. I'll come back to you as and when we get further details, and pictures are awaited from Mumbai, where at the Raj Bhavan at 10 o'clock this morning, Prime Ministers Modi and Starmer will be meeting, after which at 11:30 there will be the India-UK joint statement that is expected to be read out. There might be a brief press interaction as well. And then at 1:30 in the afternoon, they will jointly attend the CEOs Forum at the Geo World Centre, which will be followed by the Global FinTech Fest, which both Prime Ministers will attend together. But what is at stake in this India-UK relationship? This is the second time that both leaders are meeting in the space of the last 3 months. I want to go across to Nick Booker, who's a historian and philosopher, and also Ashok Sajanhar, former diplomat, who's joining us. Mr. Booker, I just want to lay the context for our viewers before I come to you, and that is, for Prime Minister Starmer, this meeting couldn't come at a more opportune time. He is really under a lot of pressure domestically. I think the conversation in Britain, particularly when it comes to immigration, has shifted really far out right. There are opinion polls and polls in the country showing that if elections were to be held today, Prime Minister Starmer will find it difficult to get re-elected. And one of the major concerns for the British people is the issue of immigration. At a time such as this, for him to make this big visit, this big showcase visit to India with the largest business delegation, 125 of them, what's at stake for him?
Namaskar and good morning. It is very exciting being in Mumbai, because wherever you go in the city at the moment, you're seeing these huge placards of Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And even the Bandra-Worli Sea Link, I don't know if you saw that, but last night it was lit up with their faces saying Mumbai welcomes UK-India partnership. And of course, this city has been part of the UK-India relationship for over 350 years. If you go back to 1661, Catherine de Braganza was Portuguese, and when she married King Charles II of England, part of her dowry were the islands of Bombay, the Good Bay. And that is how Bombay became part of British history. And what is going on now with the situation with Prime Minister Keir Starmer domestically in terms of politics? Well, of course, with a 1.5 million strong Indian diaspora, Indians are incredibly important in domestic politics. And I think that the positive story there is the fact that increasing trade, currently £42.6 billion a year between UK and India, increasing that trade by about 39% to in terms of the extra increase that this trade deal will bring, is something that is Keir Starmer is very keen to be touting to the wider economy in the UK to get more British people excited for the potential for trade with India to increase. And of course, that trade includes goods and services. And part of the services that Britain provides to India are education. And Indian students are an absolutely critical part of British universities, of British university life. And 98,014 Indian students studying in the UK. Many universities really depend on that Indian student income. So when we talk about immigration, it's a shame that in the last few years, Indian students have been included in those statistics when in fact they are making such a positive contribution to British life and to British universities themselves.
I do want to ask Ambassador Sajanhar also about this whole conversation around students, and this is coming at a time when, we've seen what is happening across the Atlantic on the H-1B issue. There's been a significant drop in the number of students, for example, going into the US. I think there's a 50% drop compared to last year. And I think Prime Minister Starmer was asked this question by the British press on board when he was arriving to Mumbai about the question of Indian students. And I think from what I remember, it used to be at a peak of 170,000 or so a few years ago. Now it's come down a bit. And he's also sort of buying into this philosophy of, we would love for Indian students to come study in British universities, but we also want them to go back. And I would rather encourage British universities to set up shop in India, like a couple already have. He wants more of that to happen and not so much get, tied down in this whole immigration debate, much like we're seeing in the United States. Ambassador Sajanhar.
Yeah, thank you very much, Zaka. You're very right that, this has been an agenda that has really struck Prime Minister Keir Starmer. And, there are sort of, ripples from across the Atlantic as far as the United States is concerned. But I think as far as Indian students are concerned, you're right, it was 170,000, it's come down a little. But I think if it is coming down in the United States, the Indian students will either continue to study, there have to be more opportunities, more facilities that we have to create in India. And as you said, there are the UK universities, I think the University of Southampton has established a campus in Gurugram. There are two other universities that are looking at the gift city to come there. There are universities from Australia that are coming here. So I think there is an increasing number of high-end universities, for which Indian students would go out. But that having been said, meaning student visas, education, and their post-study training, that I think will be discussed under the rubric of education. But if you look at the economic and trade partnership agreement that has been signed, there is a whole host of, if you're talking just about visas, there's a whole host of categories which has been identified, which will get easier access to the United States, as far as businesses are concerned, as far as corporates are concerned, short-term visas, as far as, taking their businesses forward, even as far as corporate transferees are concerned. So there is a whole host of things that has been provided. Okay. Maybe, it is basically to cater to his domestic audience that we are not making our country open for, as far as immigration and visa is concerned, because that's a, red hot button issue also as far as the UK domestic politics is concerned.
Yeah.
So maybe that is the reason, but otherwise I think the comprehensive economic trade partnership, that takes the relationship even in the area of visas. And the last point that I'll mention, Zaka, is that, no payment of social security. Otherwise, what used to happen is that all these, those who are going to work there for short-term visas, 3 years, etc., they pay this social security and it just goes down the drain. As far as now it is concerned, those who are going on short-term engagement, short-term, entrepreneurs who are going there to work for 3 years or something, they don't have to pay any social security, and that I think is a huge...
It's a significant one. It enables mobility, particularly for those in the high-tech sector. I'll talk about that in just 1 second. But Mr. Booker, this is also coming at a time when the global mood, and led by the United States, led by Mr. Trump, seems to have turned anti-trade. Look at the tariff issue that's been roiling much of the world over the last 6-7 months now since Mr. Trump came to office. How does the British Prime Minister sell globalized trade and more business prospects for British businesses at a time when, the mood in the West seems to be, at least when it comes to the issue of trade, far more insular than at any time in recent history?
Well, there are many things that Britain simply isn't able to make anymore. So it has to trade in order to be able to clothe its people, in order to be able to create the vehicles, create the engines, create the machinery. So much has to be imported into Britain to feed its people. So Britain needs to trade in order to survive. but also needs to trade in terms of exports in order to grow. And in India, we are in one of the, if not the fastest major growing economy of the 2020s. I think we could safely say we are living in the first Indian decade of the Indian century. So British businesses, whether they be young 20-year-old startup, 21-year-old university graduate startup entrepreneurs needing to build on the India stack, which is what we'll be hearing about today at the FinTech Summit, the power of UPI, the power of the kind of digital public infrastructure that India has, which is absolutely world-class. Or whether it be the machinery, the cars, Tata Jaguar Land Rover, machinery, Rolls-Royce engines. There's so much that Britain has to offer India. But what we really need, and this goes back to the point that we just heard from Ambassador, is more British people learning about contemporary India. And we need more Indians getting a high-quality education in terms of the skills that India needs to grow. And that is where, when these British universities are coming to set up campuses in India, there is a real opportunity to focus on their core mission, which is education and providing high quality education.
All right. Okay.
Rather than routes for immigration, which is what many universities have actually been promoting in order to recruit students for the last decade or so.
Before I get a final word from Ambassador Sajanhar, the India-UK Free Trade Agreement, it's the first major free trade agreement that India has signed with any major Western power. Same's the case for Britain. In fact, after Brexit, this is one of the major free trade agreements that Britain has signed. And that, of course, makes several popular products affordable, and that's a major boost for consumers as well as businesses. For example, Scotch whisky. Duties on Scotch whisky have now been slashed from 150% to 75%, which makes premium British spirits significantly cheaper here in India. Chocolates will now attract just a 3% import duty. Earlier it used to be 15%, it's now down to just 3%, and that will give a sweet edge to trade ties. Textiles, and this is very important because it comes at a time when, textiles, particularly exports to the US, are facing pressure because of the Trump tariffs. Now, textile tariffs have been reduced from 12% to 0%, which opens up a smoother access for fashion and fabric exports, etc. Leather, footwear, again, these are very labor-intensive sectors. The earlier duty was 16%. It's now been completely eliminated. So that's, again, a big plus for footwear manufacturers. And in a major shift for green mobility, electric vehicles will now face just 10% tariffs set within a quota compared to the 110%, which was the previous tariff for electric vehicles. That will again pave the way for cleaner, more affordable technology on Indian roads. So I want to get a final word from Ambassador Sajanhar. India, let's lay out the context. I mean, the fact that India is one of the major countries that has pulled off an FTA with Britain, and at the same time, we are yet to completely get around doing that with the United States because of all kinds of reasons. I don't want to get into the reasons. How much will that play and figure in today's talks? Because, Britain has managed to get an FTA with the US. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think it has the lowest of all the countries at 10% tariffs, the Trump-imposed tariffs. How much might that have a bearing in the conversations that happen between Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Starmer today?
Yeah, I think that will be a huge issue of discussion, and I think it will also send out a very strong message. Of course, Prime Minister Modi went in July to the United Kingdom and signed that agreement. But in terms of the elements, in terms of the scope, the comprehensive nature of this agreement, 26 chapters, including environment, labor, high-tech, investment, IPRs, etc., I think this is going to send out a very strong message. I will not equate it, Zaka, to the Tianjin photo opportunity that happened between three leaders. But I think it is going to send out a very strong message. Number two, I think this is also going to serve as a template for other agreements that we are negotiating. For instance, as far as India-EU is concerned, if the United Kingdom can sign this agreement, if before that Australia, we were able to sign a very comprehensive agreement with them also. And Australia, mind you, is a very significant and a very competitive manufacturer of agricultural products, producer of agricultural products. So if we can do that, then I think this is definitely going to send out a message to the United States.
All right.
The final point I'll make here is, no country, you take it from, last 100 years or plus, no country has been able to develop without focusing on its exports. No country has been able to develop without focusing on trade. So right now, what we are seeing is that there is weaponization of supply chain. We
Correct.
need to make resilient supply chains. We see that there is weaponization of tariffs. We see weaponization of access to markets. We have to diversify. The point I'm making, Zaka, is that we need to see how globalization can be reformed, can be changed. But you can't throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Correct.
Say that globalization has not served us, we are going to go away and we are going to have bilateral deals. That will not work. Bilateral deals amongst if you take WTO only, 166 member countries of the WTO, are we going to sign bilateral deals? That's
Yeah.
what Mr. Trump started doing out. So that's not the road to follow.
I think it's the prevalent mood. Certainly, it's a passing phase, and as they say, these too shall pass. Thank you very much for joining us, Ambassador Sajjanhar and Mr. Booker. We'll be in touch with you through the course of the next couple of hours. At 10 a.m. is when the Prime Ministers meet at the Raj Bhavan. Prime Minister Starmer of the UK is on a 2-day visit to India.